Hello and welcome to BYJU'S. Last week, we discussed and analyzed the visit of Bangladeshi Prime Minister to India. The topic for this week is electronic voting machine. We'll talk about the facts, we'll talk about the allegations and the solutions. Recently, elections to 5 states were announced. The voting took place through electronic voting machines. And ultimately, once the results were announced, the political parties which lost these elections, instead of blaming their own policies, programs, agendas, strategies, they started blaming these electronic voting machines for their defeat. So in this lecture, we'll talk about all that you need to know regarding electronic voting machines. Basically, any voting system has 4 required characteristics. EVM is a voting system. Before that, we were using ballot papers. Any voting system, for that matter, must meet 4 required characteristics. Characteristic number 1, accuracy. What is my intent? My intent is to vote for a party A. This intent must meet the reality. That means the voting system must ensure that my vote indeed went to the party A. Accuracy. Second, anonymity. Except me, no one should ever come to know for which political party I voted for. This is to prevent future victimization of the voters. That means not only should this system be accurate, it should also be anonymous. Third, scalability. The pace at which we are growing in terms of our population, we will soon surpass China as the most populous country of the world. So a voting system should be such that it should be in a position to handle very large elections. And these large elections should be in a position to cater to a large population base as well. So not only should a voting system be accurate, it should also be anonymous. It should also be scalable. And at the same time, speed should also be ensured. That means the voting systems should produce results very quickly. Initially, as I said, we were using ballot papers. The election process, because of this, was time consuming. And the results would take a considerably long time to be declared. Then we switched to electronic voting machines. This EVM was for the first time used in 1982. The place was Parur Assembly Constituency and the state was Kerala. That means for the first time an EVM was used in this country in a bipole to Parur Assembly Constituency in Kerala. The year was 1982. But this election was declared null and void by the court. The court declared that a Representation of the People's Act explicitly talks about that Election Commission must conduct and hold elections using ballot papers. There is no mention of electronic voting machine in the Representation of the People's Act. So, if you have used electronic voting machines, you have violated the law. And because you have violated the law, the election is null and void. Then this Representation of the People's Act was amended. The year was 1988, December 1988 to be precise. And this law came into force from 1989. So the law authorized the use of electronic voting machines in Indian elections from 1989 onwards. And from the year 2004, we have been using these electronic voting machines everywhere. Before that, we were using these electronic voting machines on experimental basis. But from 2004 onwards, the entire election exercise is conducted using electronic voting machines. So what are we talking about? An electronic voting machine. Before this, we were using ballot paper. Then on experimental basis, we used this electronic voting machine in 1982. Because the law at that point in time did not authorize the use of electronic voting machine, ultimately the law had to be amended. And the Parliament amended the law in 1988, and which authorized Election Commission of India to use electronic voting machines in Indian elections. Now let's talk about the facts related to electronic voting machines, where potential questions in your prelims examination can be asked. Basically, this electronic voting machine has two units. One is a control unit, the other is a balloting unit. This control unit and balloting unit is joined by a 5-meter cable. Can be a potential question for your prelims examination. Now, this control unit is with the presiding officer or a polling officer. For example, this is a polling booth. You are a voter. The control unit will be with me because I am the polling officer. The balloting unit will be kept in a compartment where you will be authorized to vote. Before electronic voting machines were used, what was the procedure? You are a voter. You enter into a polling booth. I would give you a ballot paper. On this ballot paper, you had to mark your preference. And you mark your preference and drop this ballot paper into a ballot box. This was the procedure in the past. Now, because of these electronic voting machines, what happens? You are a voter. Once you enter into a polling booth, then you can go to a compartment, and I am the presiding officer. I will press the ballot button on this control unit. Once I will press the ballot button on this control unit, only then can you vote on the balloting unit. And this is how your vote will be registered. Let's look at another fact. EVMs can record maximum of 3,840 votes. Now you will say that this is too small a number. But the fact is, these polling booths are scattered throughout the constituency. And the Election Commission of India ensures that in a particular polling booth, not more than 1,500 voters are there. That means since in a polling booth, 1,500 is the maximum or an ideal number of voters, this electronic voting machine strength of 3,840 votes is sufficient enough. That means what is the maximum number of votes that can be polled using an electronic voting machine or a single electronic voting machine? 3,840. EVMs can cater to a maximum of 64 candidates. That means in this constituency, if there are up to 64 candidates, we can use these electronic voting machines. What if the number of candidates exceeds 64? Then we can't use electronic voting machines. Then we have to go back to the use of ballot papers. Let's look at another fact. The EVMs have been devised and designed by Election Commission of India. But Election Commission of India in collaboration with two public sector undertakings. One is Bharat Electronics Limited at Bengaluru. The other is Electronic Corporation of India situated at Hyderabad. Now let's look at the advantages of an electronic voting machine. Why is it that we divorced ballot papers and opted for an electronic voting machine? The big advantage of using an electronic voting machine is to solve the problem of booth capturing. Now, what does that mean? By booth capturing, if you mean taking away or damaging of ballot boxes or ballot papers, this evil cannot be prevented by the use of EVMs. That means if you're saying that booth capturing means I can take away ballot boxes and ballot papers, this is something which cannot be prevented because EVMs can also be forcibly taken away or damaged by the miscreants. So such a type of booth capturing cannot be prevented by electronic voting machines. But if we look at booth capturing as a case of miscreants intimidating the polling personnel, stamping the ballot papers on the symbol and escaping in the minutes, this can be prevented by the use of electronic voting machines. Because this is something which was happening in the past. Miscreants would come to a polling booth, snatch the ballot papers, stamp them, drop them in the ballot boxes, and then run away. This type of booth capturing can be prevented and is prevented by electronic voting machine. Because these electronic voting machines are programmed in such a way that the machines will record only 5 votes in a minute. Now, what does that mean? For example, you are a miscreant. You enter into a polling booth. How can you vote through an electronic voting machine? First, I am the presiding officer. I have to press the ballot button. Then only can you vote in the balloting unit. That means as the recording of votes has necessarily to be through the control unit and balloting unit. Whatever be the number of miscreants, they can record vote only at the rate of 5 votes per minute. Not only this, if I see miscreants entering into the polling booth, I can use the close button on the control unit, and after that, it would not be possible to record any vote on electronic voting machine. That means it will not be possible to record any vote once the close button is pressed. And this will frustrate the efforts of those who want to capture the booth. This is a very, very big advantage. Not only this, the most important advantage is that printing of millions of ballot papers can be dispensed with. This results in huge savings by way of cost of paper, printing, transportation, storage, and distribution. Second important thing, the counting is very quick and the results can be declared within 2 to 3 hours. Compared to 30 to 40 hours it used to take in the ballot paper era. That means not only are these electronic voting machines effective in curbing the menace of booth capturing, it also saves large amounts of paper. Not only are these electronic voting machines environment friendly, but also the fact that election results can be declared within 2 to 3 hours. Another important advantage of using an electronic voting machine is that there are no invalid votes. This was the problem in the era of ballot papers. I'll give you a ballot paper. You will have to mark your preference for which political party you want to vote for. But when the votes were checked, when the votes were counted, ultimately it was very difficult to understand which political party are you voting for. That means you have marked your preference in such a manner that I'm not able to understand whether you have voted for party A or party B, candidate A or candidate B. That means there were a large number of invalid votes. And if you will recall, before electronic voting machines, the number of invalid votes were more than the winning margin. That means if this is the winning candidate, this is the candidate who is the runner-up. The margin between the winning candidate and the runner-up was less than the number of invalid votes in that particular constituency. That means because of electronic voting machines, now there are no invalid votes. That means the choice of the electorate will be more correctly reflected when electronic voting machines are used. Election Commission of India organizes regular programs generating awareness about these electronic voting machines. This initiative has been welcomed by all. But yes, there are some sore losers as well. If I win, these EVMs are the best. And if I lose, blame it all on these electronic voting machines. BJP in the past and Aam Aadmi Party, BSP and others today have attacked these electronic voting machines. These political parties, instead of blaming the EVMs, should have utilized the time introspecting about the reasons for their loss. The Election Commission has now announced an open challenge to people to hack its electronic voting machine. A move which comes after opposition parties urged the Election Commission of India to revert to the ballot paper system of the past. Election Commission of India thundered. From first week of May, experts, scientists, technocrats can come for a week or 10 days and try to hack the electronic voting machines. The Election Commission had announced a similar challenge way back in 2009. And then it claimed that in 2009, no one could hack its electronic voting machine. The only difference is then it was BJP which raised the objections over the use of EVMs. In fact, the current spokesperson of the BJP, GVL Narasimha Rao, he even wrote a book criticizing the electronic voting machines. Ironically, the introduction to this book was written by L.K. Advani. But the fact is, these electronic voting machines have come under criticism. Political parties have criticized these electronic voting machines, and they have blamed the electronic voting machines for their loss. These critics cite the global example. They say there are various countries in the world which do not use electronic voting machines because they can be hacked, they can be tampered with. They cite the example of Netherlands, where it was banned for the lack of transparency. In fact, there is a Dutch public interest group named We Do Not Trust Electronic Voting Machines. This Dutch public interest group produced a video showing how quickly the electronic voting machines could be hacked without election officials even aware of it. This clip was broadcast on Dutch national television in October 2006, and the Netherlands banned all electronic voting machines from use in elections. Ireland, after 3 years of research worth £51 million, decided that we will not use electronic voting machines because they are not safe. Germany declared electronic voting machines unconstitutional. In United States, California, and many other states do not use electronic voting machines. And England and France have never used electronic voting machines. These examples are cited by the critics who also demand that these electronic voting machines should be banned. But then, let's come to the defense of these electronic voting machines. If we look at the software which is used in these electronic voting machines, they cannot be altered. So there is absolutely no possibility of data corruption. The software in this electronic voting machine chip is a one-time programmable and is burnt into the chip at the time of manufacture. That means nothing can be written on the chip after the manufacture. That means this machine has just a one-time program or chip built into it, like a calculator. So just like you cannot tamper with the calculator, it is the same with electronic voting machine. The electronic voting machines used by Election Commission of India, they are standalone machines. If you look at the electronic voting machines which are used in other countries, they are computer-based and they are linked with the internet. So they can be hacked because they are linked with the internet. They are a computer-based electronic voting machine. But the electronic voting machine used by Election Commission of India, they are standalone machines. They cannot be tampered with. They cannot be hacked. Before every election, a first level check is done for every electronic voting machine to be used in the elections. And this first level check is done in presence of the representatives of the political parties. Let's look at another defense. And the points which I'm mentioning can be relevant for your prelims examination as well. Buttons on electronic voting machines are not permanently fixed in the names of political parties, but they are fixed in the alphabetical order of the names of candidates in the constituency. So you can't say that these electronic voting machines are rigged, are tampered with, and the first button on the electronic voting machine is a BJP button or a Congress button, because this button is not fixed. That means these buttons on the electronic voting machines are arranged alphabetically based on the candidate's name in that particular constituency. That means the BJP or the Congress name can go up or down according to the candidate's name in every constituency. In the year 2006, a technical evaluation committee. This technical evaluation committee ruled out the possibility of tampering of this control unit. Why? Because this control unit does not have a receiver. It does not have a decoder. So you cannot tamper with this control unit from a different place, from a distant place as well, because these are standalone machines which do not have any receiver or data coder. So they cannot be remotely hacked. In Europe, in the 4 countries it was abandoned, the electronic voting machines were made by the same Dutch company. And the failure of one machine led to its withdrawal from all the 4 countries. Germany, for instance. Germany, I told you, rejected EVMs not because there is something wrong with the technology, but because its Supreme Court said voting has to be transparent. When I press the button on this electronic voting machine, how do I know whether the vote has been reflected against the same party for which I'm voting or not? Since there is lack of transparency in such a system, that is why the Supreme Court of Germany banned these electronic voting machines. But I'm sure if VVPAT, which we will discuss later, if VVPAT is used in the electronic voting machines in Germany, the same Supreme Court of Germany will also authorize these electronic voting machines. One techie in 2009, his name was Hari Prasad. He teamed up with a professor and couple of students of computer science at the University of Michigan. They had claimed that with some underhand hardware changes, the EVMs could be programmed to favor a particular candidate. The Election Commission of India had back then disputed these claims and issued a clarification. And this clarification reiterated that EVMs are safe. In fact, the then Congress government had arrested Hari Prasad on charges of stealing an EVM. Election Commission of India had since then maintained enough precautions and security to keep these EVMs safe from manipulation. Even if we go by the claims of Hari Prasad, you have to first steal an electronic voting machine, then change the hardware, then you can manipulate them. But these EVMs are under the control of Election Commission of India. And even then, this is not hacking, as hacking is typically used for software manipulation. The Election Commission of India in 2009 invited political parties and various petitioners to demonstrate on 100 EVMs. How these EVMs, which are brought from different states, how the machines could not be tampered with. Election Commission of India demonstrated the safety of these electronic voting machines. Many people who complained against EVMs, they were asked to show how these EVMs can be hacked. The outcome of this exercise in 2009 was that none of the persons who were given the opportunity and who had brought with them technical experts could actually claim and demonstrate how EVMs can be tampered. Despite repeated, useless, irresponsible allegations against EVMs, do you know why people still trust EVMs? It's because of the world-renowned institution called Election Commission of India. This independent constitutional authority has been working completely impartially, and that is why the political parties who are on the losing side speak against EVMs. People still trust EVMs because they trust Election Commission of India, and because of Election Commission of India handling these EVMs, they trust EVMs as well. Captain Amarinder Singh, the current Chief Minister of Punjab, he rightly asked a simple question to his colleagues in the Congress party and the opposition. He asked, if EVMs have been hacked and the election has been rigged, how do you justify my election? But still, if the people have questioned electronic voting machines, if people have challenged electronic voting machines, the Election Commission of India should not hesitate and prove, not to these political parties, but to the people. Prove to the people that these electronic voting machines are safe and cannot be tampered with. And it is very good. And kudos to Election Commission of India. They have invited all those people who claim that these electronic voting machines can be hacked. Come in the month of May, come for a week or 10 days and prove to us that these electronic voting machines can be tampered. But then, what is the way forward? The way forward is VVPAT, Voter Verifiable Paper Audit Trail. This system of VVPAT might be costly, but it is unavoidable in the current circumstances. What is this VVPAT? VVPAT functions like a printer. Printer attached to a ballot unit. That means you enter into a polling booth, then you enter into the voting compartment. There is a balloting unit. With this balloting unit is attached a VVPAT. Once the voter presses the button against the name of the candidate of her choice, this VVPAT generates a ballot slip or a paper slip. This paper slip contains name, serial number, and symbol of the chosen candidate. The voter can see the slip through a screened window. That means a window will display this ballot slip for 7 seconds. Then it gets automatically cut and falls in a sealed drop box. That means this ballot slip neither goes into the hands of the voter nor others get to see it. September 2013, this VVPAT was used for the first time in the Naxon Assembly constituency in Nagaland. VVPAT with EVMs was used for the first time in this Naxon Assembly seat in Nagaland. In the case of Subramaniam Swamy versus Election Commission of India in 2013, the Supreme Court said VVPAT is an indispensable tool for free and fair elections. And Supreme Court directed the Election Commission of India to equip these electronic voting machines with VVPAT systems. Subramaniam Swamy did not prove machines could be tampered with. In response to his petition, the Supreme Court ordered the Election Commission to introduce VVPAT. Any accusation of rigging can be proved if the result of the machine and the slip is not the same. That means once these VVPAT machines are used, the counting will still take place through electronic voting machines. That means the votes in electronic voting machines will be counted. But if some people will dispute these votes, then you have to compare the votes of an electronic voting machine with these ballot slips. And if there is a mismatch, the ballot slips will prevail over electronic voting machines. That means any accusation of rigging can be proved if the result of the machine and the slip is not the same. Now, this is what former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi has to say. He says that we did our first dry test or first dry run of these VVPATs in 5 states. To test these VVPATs in 5 different climatic conditions. We simulated an election but found that printer had 40% bugs. That is why we did not continue with these VVPATs and we sent these VVPATs back to the company. The problem is, unlike the EVMs, the printer is an electromechanical device, which means it has moving parts and is more likely to go wrong. To give you a simple example, your calculator may not malfunction for 5 years. But tell me honestly, how often has your printer jammed in the last week? That is the difference. But now the Union Cabinet, led by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has approved a proposal to buy 16,15,000 voter verifiable paper audit trail machines, which can be used for 2019 general election. Now let us look at another issue which is linked with electronic voting machine, totalizers. Is it not dangerous that Election Commission allows booth-wise results to be made public? What does that mean? Kiran Bedi contested election to the Delhi Assembly. Ultimately, she lost by close to less than 3,000 votes. She was asked about the reasons for her loss. She said, I was leading from every polling booth. But once the votes from a particular polling booth were counted, I lost. That means it is possible and it is completely known to the political parties and their candidates which polling booth voted for them, which polling booth voted against them. That means once we count the votes in these electronic voting machines, we take these electronic voting machines booth-wise. This is very problematic. That means tomorrow, if my polling booth did not vote for a candidate A, and if this candidate A wins this election, this candidate will victimize the people from my polling booth. This is bad. To solve such a problem, what we need, totalizers. What is this totalizer? This machine is an interface. This interface to which a cluster of EVMs can be connected simultaneously. That means this totalizer is an interface. To this interface, various EVMs can be connected simultaneously, and then all these votes shall be counted and the results will be given. That means now if totalizers are used, no political party, no candidate will get to know which polling booth voted for them, which polling booth voted against them. That means the secrecy of the vote will be maintained. S.Y. Qureshi, the former Chief Election Commissioner, he was asked, why is it that you are not using totalizers? Why is it that you are disclosing booth-wise results? He said, don't blame EC. Instead, blame the political parties. 15 years ago, the Election Commission of India had asked the opinions of political parties. And these political parties said, no, we don't want to use totalizers. We need booth-wise results so that tomorrow we can use these results for booth management. Because earlier, before EVMs were used, Election Commission of India used to mix ballot papers in a drum to protect the voters. That means ballot boxes were collected, these votes were dropped in the drum, and from drum, these ballot papers were collected and counted. Law Commission of India has also recommended these electronic voting machine totalizers. Law Commission of India said that totalizer would help in a situation which we witnessed in 2014 Lok Sabha elections in Hoshangabad. In Hoshangabad, an electronic voting machine malfunctioned just minutes before voting was to conclude at 6 p.m. There was a single voter who had to cast his vote. Then a new EVM was used and the voter voted. But what about the secrecy of his vote? Only one vote was polled in this new electronic voting machine. The Election Commission of India issued a clarification that even this single vote had to be counted even if it compromised on the voter's secrecy. If totalizers are used, such a situation can be prevented. This is all that you need to know regarding electronic voting machines, the controversy, the defense of these electronic voting machines, and the way forward. A word for politicians before we end this lecture. Focus on your policies, ideology, leadership. Blaming Election Commission of India and electronic voting machines can give you a few hours of airtime on TV studios. But do you need airtime or votes? If votes, then go back to the electorate. Thank you for watching.